44 years old, and Beverly had never once in her adult life paid herself first. Not once. Every week for 22 years, the money came in and the money left. Rent first, electric first, car first, groceries first, credit card minimum first. Whatever was left, which was usually between $9 and $31, was hers. For everything else, for emergencies, for the future, for herself. $9 and $31, sometimes less. Sometimes nothing. And Beverly was not lazy. She was not careless. She was not someone who had wasted her life on things that didn't matter. She had worked double shifts. She had gone without. She had said no to herself so many times that saying no had stopped feeling like a sacrifice and started feeling like her personality. And still, the debt sat there. Month after month, the same numbers staring back at her from the same screen. Going nowhere. Sometimes going up when an emergency hit and she had no cushion. Never going down enough to matter. But I want you to hold something before we go any further. There was 1 week, right in the middle of all of this, when Beverly almost did something that would have sent her backward so far she might never have found her way again. She almost made a decision that felt like survival but would have been devastation. We will get to what that decision was. But first, I need you to understand who Beverly was, because Beverly might be the most familiar woman I have ever told you about. Beverly worked as a dietary aide at a long-term care facility in Shreveport, Louisiana. She had been there for 9 years. Her job was to prepare meal trays, deliver them to residents, collect them, wash them, and start again. 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, and occasional weekend shifts when they were short-staffed, which was often. She wore a hairnet and a pair of white non-slip shoes that she replaced every 8 months when the soles wore smooth. She kept a spare pair in her locker in case the first ones got soaked from the kitchen floor, which they did regularly. The residents knew her by her voice before they saw her come through the door. She had the kind of voice that arrived ahead of her, warm and unhurried, the kind that made very old, very tired people feel like someone was genuinely glad to see them. Several of the women on the second floor called her by name and reached for her hand when she set down their trays. Beverly always held on for a moment before letting go, even when she was behind schedule, especially then. She had 2 boys, Deshaun, 17, and Malik, 14. She raised them in a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of Shreveport that required paying attention to certain things at certain hours of the evening. She was vigilant in the way that mothers in those neighborhoods are vigilant, quietly, constantly, without making the boys feel it as fear. Every night before she went to sleep, she rubbed lotion into her hands. The kitchen work and the sanitizing solutions left them dry and cracked along the knuckles. She kept a pump bottle of fragrance-free lotion on the nightstand and worked it in slowly, 1 finger at a time. It was the only quiet moment that belonged entirely to her all day. Inside her closet, on the highest shelf behind a stack of shoeboxes, was a canvas tote bag. Inside the tote bag was a mason jar, and inside the mason jar were folded bills and a small amount of coins, everything she had been able to set aside in the last 3 years. On the outside of the jar, in black marker, she had written 2 words, Boys' College. She had never told Deshaun or Malik the jar existed. She didn't want them to feel the weight of what she was sacrificing for it. She didn't want them to carry guilt on top of everything else the world was already handing them. The jar had $63 and some change in it. 3 years of squeezing and sacrificing, and the jar held $63. She knew that. She looked at it some nights, and she put it back, and she went to bed. The thing about debt is that it does not announce itself as a crisis until it is already won. Beverly had been carrying a credit card balance for 6 years. It had started with 1 card, an $1,100 balance she had put on there during a week when everything had happened at once. Malik needed glasses, the car needed new brake pads, and the electric bill came in higher than she had budgeted for by $68. She had put it all on the card and told herself she would pay it down fast. She had not paid it down fast. She had paid the minimum every month without missing once, and the balance had barely moved, because the minimum payment on that card was $41 a month, and $33 of it was interest. She was paying $33 a month to go nowhere. Then came the second card. Opened during another emergency, this one a car repair that cost $420 and could not wait. That card had a higher interest rate than the first. She had not realized how much higher until later, when she finally sat down with both statements in front of her and added the numbers. 2 cards, combined balance of $2,080, combined minimum payments of $93 per month, combined interest charges of $71 per month. She was handing $71 every single month to 2 credit card companies and watching her balances barely breathe downward. She had been doing this for 6 years. When she finally did that math, sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday night with both statements and a calculator, her first feeling was not panic. It was something heavier than panic, something that sat in the chest like wet concrete. Because she realized she had known, somewhere underneath everything, that the numbers were bad. She had just never looked at them directly in the same moment. She had been managing them in pieces, individually, in the dark, the way you look at something frightening only from the corner of your eye, because you are afraid of what you will see if you turn and face it. What sent her toward the edge was not the math. The math she could have endured. What sent her toward the edge was the phone call from Deshawn's school on a Thursday afternoon, informing her that there was a fee of $215 for his senior class materials, his cap and gown, his yearbook, the things that would mark the end of his childhood, and it was due by the end of the month. She did not have $215. She looked at the mason jar. She told herself it was a loan. She told herself she would put it back. She got up from the kitchen table, went to the closet, reached up to the highest shelf, and she took down the jar. She counted out $63. She put it in her pocket, and she stood there in the closet for a moment, holding the empty jar, feeling the exact weight of 3 years of sacrifice reduced to nothing in under 2 minutes. She put the jar back, empty. She closed the closet door. That night, after the boys were asleep, she sat on the edge of her bed and she called a number she had been thinking about for 2 weeks. A finance company that offered personal loans to people with imperfect credit. She had already looked up the terms. The interest rate was 31% annually. The monthly payment on a $1,500 loan would be $89 for 2 years. She did not want to do it. She knew exactly what 31% meant. She had the math in her head from her own research. Her finger was on the call button. She stopped. Not because she changed her mind. She stopped because her phone lit up with a message from a number she did not immediately recognize. And what the message said made her set the phone face down on the mattress and just breathe for a minute. Bloco 4, Mentor Sabio. The message was from a woman named Miss Ernestine. Miss Ernestine was in her mid-70s and had been a resident on the 2nd floor of the facility for 4 months. She was one of the women who called Beverly by name and reached for her hand at mealtimes. She had a daughter in Houston who had given Beverly her mother's personal cell number in case anything urgent came up on a weekend shift. The message said, "Beverly, my daughter tells me you are dealing with something hard. She heard it in your voice today. I used to be a bookkeeper. I am not asleep yet. You can call if you want." Beverly stared at the message. She did not know how. She did not entirely know why. But she called. Miss Ernestine picked up on the second ring. The sound of the television in the background clicked off. Silence. Warm, available, patient silence. Beverly talked. For 20 minutes she talked, and Miss Ernestine listened without a single interruption. Not one. Just her breathing on the other end of the line, steady and calm, the breathing of a woman who has long since stopped being afraid of hard things. When Beverly finished, Miss Ernestine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me one thing. Every month when your check comes, who is the first one you pay?" Beverly thought about it. "Rent," Miss Ernestine said. "Before rent." Beverly said she didn't understand. Miss Ernestine said, "Before the rent, before the electric, before the cards, before every single one of them. Who pays Beverly?" Beverly didn't answer. Miss Ernestine said, "Nobody. That is the problem. That is the whole problem." She let that sit for a moment. Then she said the thing Beverly would carry for the rest of her life. She said, "You work for everyone else first. Start working for yourself first, even if it is only $10. Beverly wrote it down on the back of a receipt that was sitting on the nightstand. Miss Ernestine said goodnight, said she needed her sleep, said they could talk more on Monday when Beverly brought her breakfast. Beverly sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the call ended. She looked at what she had written. She did not make the loan call that night. She put her phone on the charger. She rubbed lotion into her hands, one finger at a time, and she started thinking differently. What Beverly discovered over the weeks that followed did not arrive like a flood. It arrived the way truth usually arrives to a tired woman, slowly, quietly, one thing at a time, each thing opening the door to the next. The first thing she understood was what it means to pay yourself first. Truly understood it, not as a slogan, but as a mechanism. When you pay everyone else before you pay yourself, you are operating under the belief, conscious or not, that you are the last priority in your own life, that your labor belongs entirely to the obligations you carry, and that you are what remains when those obligations are satisfied, which, as Beverly had discovered over 22 years, is usually nothing. Paying herself first was not selfishness. It was the acknowledgement that she was a person with needs and a future, not simply a function that processes income on behalf of other people and institutions. The second thing she understood was why the amount you start with does not matter as much as the act of starting. Miss Ernestine had said $10. Beverly had almost dismissed that because $10 felt meaningless against $2,080 of debt and $63 of savings and the cost of her children's lives. But she tried it. The first Friday, she moved $15 into a separate account before she paid anything else, and something happened in her body that she had not expected. Something settled. Not because $15 was going to solve anything, but because for the first time in 22 years, Beverly had been first on the list. The physical fact of doing it changed how she felt about the rest of the bill paying that week. Less like bleeding out, more like a woman allocating resources with intention. The third thing she came to understand was what had really happened with the mason jar. She had framed it as a failure. 3 years of effort producing $63, proof that she could not do it. But that framing was wrong. What the jar proved was that she was capable of consistent sacrifice and discipline when she had a reason that mattered enough. The problem was not her willpower. The problem was the structure. She had been trying to save from what was left over, which was almost nothing, rather than saving before the money had a chance to be absorbed by everything else. The jar method had been a good instinct executed in the wrong order. She had been saving last instead of saving first, and the difference between those two things is the difference between hoping and deciding. The fourth thing was the hardest one to sit with, and it was the one that resolved what she had been circling since the very beginning of this story. The thing Beverly had almost done the night of Miss Ernestine's call, the 31% loan, was not an act of irresponsibility. It was the logical result of a system that had never given her a cushion. When you have no cushion, every emergency becomes a crisis. And when every emergency is a crisis, debt becomes the only available response. Not because you are bad with money, but because you have been structurally set up to have no other option. The moment Beverly started paying herself first, even $15, she began building the cushion that would one day make the crisis to debt pipeline unnecessary. She was not escaping debt by earning more. She was escaping it by intercepting the money before the emergencies could consume it entirely. The fifth thing she understood was about the debt itself, and this is where her thinking shifted in a way that finally started moving the numbers. She had been paying the minimums on both cards and putting the rest of whatever extra she had toward whichever bill felt most urgent in the moment. She learned from an old library book she checked out after talking to Miss Ernestine twice more on the phone that this scattered approach was keeping the interest alive. She chose the card with the smaller balance, $840, and she directed every extra dollar above the minimum on the larger card toward that one. Not because it would feel good immediately, because the math said that eliminating one balance entirely would free up its minimum payment to attack the second one, and watching one full balance go to zero would do something for her belief in herself that no amount of gradual progress across two cards could replicate. The sixth thing, the one that made everything cohere, was what she learned about the story she had been telling herself about money, that it was for other people, that stability was for other people, that a cushion was for other people, that paying herself first was a luxury she could not afford when she was already so far behind. All of it was a story, not a lie she had invented, but one she had inherited, absorbed, repeated until it felt like fact. Beverly came from women who had lived the same way she had lived. Her mother had lived that way. Her grandmother had lived that way. The story had passed through the generations the way water passes through stone, slowly and completely. And Beverly, on the bed with lotion on her hands and a receipt on the nightstand, was the first woman in her line to name the story for what it was and decide it ended here. She started in late September, every Friday, before the rent transfer, before the car payment cleared, before she touched a single bill. Beverly moved $25 into a savings account she had opened at a credit union across town, separate from her regular bank, separate login, separate app. A small, deliberate gap between herself and that money, wide enough that she would have to mean it to touch it. The first month, she paid an extra $40 toward the smaller credit card. The second month, she found a weekend shift she had been avoiding because of exhaustion, and she took it. The extra money, $112 after taxes, went entirely to the small card. By November, she had paid off $260 of the smaller balance. It was the first time in 6 years she had seen a credit card balance move that much in 2 months. By January, the smaller card was gone, $840, paid in full. She took the statement out of her email, printed it at the library, folded it and put it in the mason jar, which now held $47 and the statement. And that combination, the new cash and the paper proof of what she had done, felt more solid than anything she had ever put in that jar. She started tracking everything more carefully, every envelope of spending written down, every dollar assigned before it had a chance to wander. A woman from her church had mentioned an app she used for exactly this kind of system, the Woman's Lesson Finance app, free, with digital envelopes for each category, a savings goal tracker, and a simple display that showed her, in plain terms, where every dollar was at any moment. Beverly had been doing it by hand in a small notebook. The app let her do the same thing faster, with less paper, and with reminders that kept her honest on the weeks when she was tired and the impulse to stop looking was strongest. She used both, the notebook for thinking, the app for tracking, and together they gave her a picture of her finances she had never had before. By April, which was the 8th month, the second card had a balance of $311. She had scheduled the final payment for the following Friday. She called Miss Ernestine on a Thursday evening to tell her. Miss Ernestine said, "I knew." Just that. I knew. In May, a new dietary aide started at the facility. Her name was Sherelle. 26 years old, first real job, quiet in the way of someone who is watching everything closely and trusting nothing yet. Beverly had been watching her for 2 weeks, noticing the way she counted her change in the parking lot before getting in her car, noticing the way she declined the vending machine on her break every single day, even when she looked like she wanted to say yes. Beverly knew that calculation. She had been making it since she was younger than Sherelle. On a Friday afternoon, while they were restocking the supply cart together, Sherelle said, without looking up, "Do they give advances here, on the paycheck?" Beverly stopped what she was doing. She looked at Sherelle for a moment. She said, "Is it an emergency or is it just the end of the month catching up?" Sherelle hesitated, then said, "Both, I think." Beverly nodded. She said, "The first thing I want to ask you is this. When your check comes in, what is the very first payment you make?" Sherelle said, "Rent." Beverly said, "Before rent. Who pays Sherelle?" Sherelle looked at her, a little confused, a little like something had just shifted without warning. Beverly reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out the receipt, the one from the nightstand, old and soft now at the folds. She had kept it. She had not meant to keep it this long, but somehow throwing it away had never felt right. She unfolded it and set it on the cart between them. In her own handwriting, "You work for everyone else first. Start working for yourself first, even if it is only $10. Sherelle read it. She read it again. Beverly said, "A woman told me that 8 months ago, on a night when I was about to make a very expensive mistake that would have cost me 2 years of digging out." She paused. "It doesn't matter how small you start. What matters is that you are first on the list every single week before anyone else gets $1. Sherelle was quiet. Beverly said, "Open a separate account if you can. Move something before anything else clears, even $10, even $5. Just be first." She folded the receipt and put it back in her pocket. She would give Sherelle the app information later, the same way someone had told her, one woman to another, casually because it worked. That evening, Beverly drove home through streets turning green with late spring. She stopped at a red light near a credit union that was not her own. Just a building like any building, glass and brick and a parking lot. She thought about the mason jar. When she got home, she went to the closet. She reached to the highest shelf. She brought the jar down and set it on the kitchen table. She took out the folded credit card statement. She looked at it one more time. Then she reached back into the jar and she took out a pen that had been rolling around at the bottom, the same one she had used to write Boys College on the glass in black marker years ago. She crossed out what it said. Underneath it she wrote Deshawn, Malik, and Beverly. She put the jar back on the shelf, not behind the shoeboxes this time, in front of them, where she could see it every morning when she opened the door. If you have ever been last on your own list, I want you to hear this. Beverly did not break the debt cycle because she earned more. She did not break it because she found some secret nobody else had access to. She broke it because one tired night, on the edge of a very expensive decision, she stopped. She listened to an old woman who had been a bookkeeper for 40 years, and who had the wisdom to ask the right question instead of give the right answer. And she decided, for the first time at 44 years old, that she was allowed to be first. Not first instead of her boys, not first instead of her obligations, first on the list, before the list, because a woman who has nothing left for herself eventually has nothing left for anyone. Come into the comments right now and type, day one. And tell me one thing you are going to do today just for yourself. One thing. Not for the kids, not for the bills, not for anyone else, just for you. I read every single comment, and I mean that. And if you have a friend, a sister, a cousin who is working herself to the bone and still ending every month with nothing, please share this video with her today. She needs to hear that it is not her fault. And she needs to hear that it can change. One little thing between us before I go. The link for the Woman's Lesson Finance app is in the pinned comment right below this video. It is free, it fits in your pocket, and it is the kind of tool that helps you finally see where your money is going, so you can put yourself first with your eyes open. And if you are not yet part of this family, I want you here. Hit subscribe and ring that bell. Every week we sit together right here and we talk about real women living real lives and finding real ways through. No pretending, no performance, just the truth, said with love. Thank you for trusting me with your time today. That is not something I take lightly, ever. I will see you in the next one. The